hello, family. Hello, Friendly Circle Berlin family. Again, my name's Joe, grateful member of the S program, and a lot of gratitude to be here with you guys as well. As Patrick opened up for us, Troy is not only a lovely human being, he's one of my best friends in the world, and I've been longing, waiting for this time to introduce Troy Love to the Friendly Circle Berlin community. So I'm honored to host this conversation. He's a lovely human. So Troy, his work has touched thousands of people through his books, through his courses, through his retreats. I met Troy about 10 years ago at a conference. And it was a conference on sex addiction. So I'm a certified sex addiction therapist here in the States. By the way, I say good morning because I'm in Southern California where it's beautiful 70-ish degrees and I'm loving it. And Troy knows what a fan I am of snow. No. And uh, all that to say that Troy and I met about, again, 10 years ago at first. So a couple of months ago, I had an opportunity to do a Q&A with Dr. Rob Weiss, which Troy is very familiar with as well. And and much like that first time that I met Dr. Rob was also at a conference where I sat in as an attendee with that conference. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is Dr. Rob Weiss, right? World renowned. He's written several books, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like a little kid in a candy store. Gosh, Troy Love had that same impact on me, and Troy knows this. When he spoke, I was like, oh my gosh, I was brand new to the field, brand new to the field, and he knew what the heck he was doing. He'd been in the field for quite some time, and went up, introduced myself, and just instantly the heart and the compassion that Troy exuded in that moment led me to believe that, hey, we could probably become friends, and we have. And he's been a confidant, he's been a mentor, and he has helped thousands of people around the states anyway. And so today, what the intention is for today is we're going to explore the story behind the finding peace model, which Troy created. He identifies 6 attachment wounds in that model and the practical ways that we can learn to hold our pain with love rather than fear. So for some of us who are part of the Friendly Circle Berlin community, we've got mentors like Jan Winhall and others who have been teaching us, IFS, polyvagal. We did a Deb Dana yesterday, and integrating that and finding out how this thing called emotional sobriety might be in play by way of getting to know our nervous system, our emotions, our feelings, et cetera, et cetera. And Troy teaches that to his clients and to others via retreats, his books, et cetera. So with that being said, Troy, let's start at the beginning. We've got 40 minutes or so. So Troy, in that finding peace model that was created, you often say that peace isn't the absence of pain. It's learning to hold your pain with love. When did you first realize your pain, or when did you first realize pain was your teacher?
When I was in therapy. I knew that things were not going well for me. I was angry all the time. I
Mm.
was a young dad in a relationship with a woman who I cared for, but there was a lot of conflict there. There was a lot of conflict in my life around all kinds of things, and I was angry. And at the time, if somebody said, hey, if you could push a button and make all this go away, would you push it? And I was like, yes, absolutely. Where's the button? How much does it cost? Let me push that thing, so I don't have to deal with any of this. And then I realized, no, I need to go to therapy. It had been a suggestion of my social work professor way back in my bachelor's degree, and I didn't think I needed therapy at the time. But I finally decided, yeah, I do. So I began to unpack my life And I began to realize that pain does serve a purpose. What I was longing for, what I wanted was peace. I wanted serenity. I wanted calm. I wanted love. I wanted joy. I wanted all those things. But unfortunately, it goes together with pain. And it's a yin and yang. And I can't have one without the other. We can't have one without the other. If I just lived in a world where there was just peace and tranquility and beauty, and I'd never experienced pain, I actually wouldn't know what a blessing that is. I
Mhm.
wouldn't understand how beautiful it is to have those moments of peace. And what pain began to teach me was there were things that I was doing in my life that were not serving me, that were actually increasing my pain, increasing the pain of the people around me. But if I could change some of those things in my life, I could change some of the behaviors and the thought processes that I had around that, I could actually experience more peace and joy in my life. And so I learned that they go together and that I don't need to look for the button to push it and make it go away. I need to learn how to lean in and be willing to hear what pain has to teach me.
That being said, Troy, I'm wondering what was there a moment or a personal experience that kind of first awakened this idea of what you've identified as attachment wounds in your book?
Yeah. So as I began to um, do the work, uh, I I got my master's in social work in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I started to go to therapy there. But I graduated, and then I got a job in the middle of nowhere where I still live today in Yuma, Arizona. It's in the bottom southwest corner of the state. I'm about 5 minutes from Mexico and 5 minutes from California. But really, I do live like the next major city is three hours away. And so when I moved here back in 2000, I got a job at a mental health agency, and I was one of a handful of therapists who lived in this town. And most of us worked for the same company. And so I needed, I couldn't go see them for therapy. And so I needed to figure out what to do. And I eventually found a therapist that would see me over the phone. It was long before Zoom even was a thing. We still had the dial up internet, back in the day. And I began to try to put some things together to help me understand what was going on with me. Why was I so reactive? Why was I so angry all the time? And in the process, I stumbled upon Sue Johnson's work with emotionally focused couples therapy and attachment theory, and I really loved learning about that. And I started to hypothesize that there are attachment wounds, that as humans we are wired for connection biologically, neurologically, socially, spiritually. And when things happen that separate us from each other or sever those connections or damage them in some way, that can create some wounds that, if they're not healed or are not even acknowledged, they can create a lot of disruption in our lives. And I began to realize that I had three primary attachment wounds. I was adopted
Test,
at
test,
birth.
1, 2, 3.
Oh, go ahead, Troy.
That's all right. I was adopted at birth. And so I realized I have an abandonment wound,
Mhm.
which makes sense because every time that I would feel connection to somebody and then they would leave, I would panic. I would freak out when people would leave me. And so I started to tie that. Oh, that's connected to an attachment wound. I also was bullied a lot especially in middle school, and so I have a huge rejection wound. And then I grew up in a home where there was a tremendous amount of domestic violence that took place. And so I have an abuse wound, which then, when I started to put words to these wounds, it helped me start to understand why I was reacting the way that I was reacting with others. And I continued to brainstorm a little bit and came up with three others: loss, neglect, and betrayal.
Mhm.
And I started to share these with the clients I was working with, and it really resonated with them. It helped them put words to what had happened to them without blaming people for what happened.
When you're working with clients, I've had the privilege of being a part of the retreats that you offer clients, just witnessing your work with clients and witnessing as a friend, witnessing how compassionate you are with those friendships and those loved ones. And in the work that you do, you often suggest that there's a sunburn moment, a sunburn moment. So, could
Yeah.
you describe a little bit about what sunburn moment means and how maybe how that you recognize how your own sunburn moments shaped your behavior?
So these wounds are like a sunburn. If you've ever had a sunburn before, you go to the beach, you have a great day, but you forget to put sunblock on. And so you are toasted. And then you have to go to work the next day. So you put your clothes on because it is recommended that you wear clothes in public. That's recommended. And then you cautiously go to work and you really don't want anybody to come up and bump against you, and bump up against that sunburn because it will hurt. There will be an immediate visceral reaction, that fight or flight response. So I want to pull away or I want to push somebody away when that burn is hurt. And that's kind of how these attachment wounds work. Like I can function, I can go it throughout my day-to-day life, I can do things, but inevitably somebody might do something or say something that will bump up against that attachment wound, and I will have the same type of reaction where I want to pull away or push people away because the pain is so intense. And when I'm able to identify, oh, that's my rejection wound, or oh, that's my abandonment wound, then I can know what I want to do about it or how I want to respond to it. So um, the but the reaction is just the same as if somebody hit a sunburn, and it can be something simple like an eyebrow raised or pursed lips or something very simple that can bump up against that wound, and then all of a sudden I'm having an emotional reaction inside.
So, some folks here in the Friendly Circle Berlin community have become very familiar with polyvagal theory,
Yeah.
and we'll talk about internal family systems in just a moment. But polyvagal theory, right? That the somatic response to our environment. In other words, this fancy word called neuroception, where our nervous system is always scanning our environment, asking the question, "Am I safe? Am I
Right.
safe?" Right? And it sounds like those sunburn moments are when the act of neuroception determines I don't think I'm safe right now, right? It
Right.
bumps up against, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
how did these early discoveries that you're sharing begin to transform the way you understood not only yourself but others as well?
I So there was a time, like again, where I was a young dad, and my wife at the time was gone, volunteering in her church responsibilities. She was working with the women in our church, and she was gone nearly every night, helping other families with things. And I was so angry and frustrated, but didn't have words to explain it until I started to do therapy. And then I recognized, oh, that is my rejection and abandonment wound being hit all the time. So it didn't feel safe. I was feeling alone and abandoned and resentful and all of those kind of things. And so I started to do therapy and work on those things, and restructured some of the thought processes that I have about that. And then we fast forward about 3 years later, she decided to go back and get her master's in education for special education. And she was gone every night. She would work all day long and then she'd be gone every night. And I was handling it differently. I wasn't reacting in the same angry, fearful way that I had before, because I was able to understand, like, I am safe. Like at the beginning, when this was happening and my neuroception was activated, like I didn't feel safe. I felt very alone and very scared. But as I started to do some work and heal some of those wounds, and she would leave, I recognized, oh, I'm okay. And we had a great time with my kids, and it's completely different. And I remember looking at that one day and saying, like, what's different? And it's because the neuroception had changed. My sense of safety had changed.
So for the community here, so I learned the Finding Peace model and learned about these six attachment wounds. Troy knows this, that I grew up in Southern California, born and raised in Southern California. I'm an LA baby, and I'm a huge sports fan. I grew up playing sports, et cetera, et cetera. And I tell clients that, well, I tell people this, but I tell clients when I'm working hey, listen, I came out of the womb wearing a Lakers jersey. I'm a huge LA Dodgers guy, Lakers guy. And for those that follow the NBA, there was a player, or there is a player that started in the league some 20 years ago by the name of LeBron James, and he was the arch enemy because he was playing against the Lakers. And then a few years ago, we got LeBron James, and I fell in love with him. Where am I going with this? So that those six attachment wounds, which I'm going to invite you to share a little bit more about in just a moment here, Troy. Those six attachment wounds, I reframed them into an acronym with Troy's help, and I came up with the word LeBron. So if you're looking at the screen and you see those six attachment wounds, if you rearrange the words, there's a LABRAN, loss, abuse, betrayal, rejection, abandonment, neglect. And that acronym has helped my clients keep those six attachment wounds in mind. Oh, am I experiencing loss right now? Am I feeling abandoned right now? Am I feeling rejected, right? We're going back to family of origin stuff, like what's coming up for you. But that neuroception where those wounds are getting poked, those sunburns are getting hit, those clients can in that moment go, just ask the question, am I experiencing a LeBron right now? And if
Mm.
so, how am I responding out of that? Right. So for those who, well, I was going to say for those who might be new to your work, I'm going to guess everyone here might be new to your work. Can you walk us through these six attachment wounds and why they matter so deeply?
Yes, absolutely. So we'll start with loss. Loss happens traditionally when we have somebody in our life who passes away. So we're close to somebody and we love them, and then they pass away for some reason. And it's not because they were doing anything to us. It's not because they were trying to inflict pain and suffering on us. It's just that's a part of life. There are other examples of loss. Often people who grow up in the military, they have to say goodbye to their friends about every 2 to 3 years and have to go say hello to new ones. So that's another form of loss where they're having to say goodbye a lot. Your best friend moves away, or you get relocated, or those kind of things where it's a part of the world that we live in where we have people in our life, and then for whatever reason we move or they pass away and we don't have them in our lives anymore. It can also be related to things physically, like I, maybe I had a stroke, and so I lost some of my ability to use my body. My hands don't work the way they used to, or I can't talk the same, or I maybe had a diabetes or something that's affected the way that I interact, and so I've experienced some loss around that. So it's that there was something there, and now it's not, but it's because of the world that we live in. Neglect, there's the Child Protective Services version of neglect where mom and dad have been gone for 3 days, the electricity has been turned off, there's no water in the home, the kids are wearing the same dirty clothes that they've worn for 3 days, there's no food in the house, and they're just trying to survive. And unfortunately, that happens a lot. But there's a more common version of neglect that we can see really anywhere we go, especially if you go out to dinner And there's families that are all on their phones. They're all on devices and they're not interacting with each other anymore. And so, although their basic needs are being met, food, clothes, shelter, those kind of things, their emotional needs are not being met. And so, when I need attention, when I need someone to help give me comfort, my parents are too busy. They're doing other things, or my caregivers are too busy. And so that can create a neglect wound. Rejection is when we're told by somebody or a group of somebodies that we aren't wanted, that there's something wrong with us, that we can't be a part of the team, we can't be part of this group, and you're not chosen, and so there's something wrong with you. Abandonment is when you have a relationship with someone and then they just disappear. They were there and now they're gone, and you don't understand why. I had a client just the other day who he was in a new relationship. It was going really well. His partner was telling him things like this is the great relationship. I love it. Like I can really see us being together forever. They went to a trip to Disney World, and on the way back, the partner was saying like this is so wonderful. And then afterwards he got a text and said, this relationship just isn't working for me, and I wish you well, and ghosted him. And that's an example of abandonment where there's no explanation, there's no understanding. It's like I am just left with you leaving and I don't have any answers. And so that's what abandonment is, where somebody leaves. Oftentimes I've had clients whose mom or dad has just left and you don't understand why. Betrayal happens when there's a relationship of trust with somebody and then they do something to violate that trust. They lie to you, they cheat on you, they steal from you, they take things from you, and it just erodes the relationship of trust that you have with that person, and oftentimes that can bleed over to I'm not sure I can trust other people as well. And then there's the abuse wound, which can be sexual abuse, spiritual abuse, physical abuse, where somebody's own woundedness is being taken out on somebody else. That they are inflicting pain onto somebody else.
Just noticing as you're describing each of these attachment wounds, I'm taking a moment and just going inside. That's the interoception, another fancy word, interoception, just noticing what's happening on the inside. So when I'm working with clients, I often press the pause. Hey, just take a moment and just notice what's happening on the inside right now, right?
Yeah.
Physiological sensations is what I'm noticing right now. My chest is feeling a little tingly, a little heavy as well, right? As you're
Mm-hmm.
sharing, I'm noticing that there's a part of me that wants to shed some tears right now because of those attachment wounds, those specifically about abandonment and rejection from my yesteryear, right? And so these parts come up. But something that there's a mantra that you share with clients, and you say, "Hey, you're not broken, you're wounded,
Mm.
and wounds can heal, right?" What's the deeper truth behind that statement, that mantra? You're wounded and wounds can heal. You're not broken.
No. So it's the similar analogy as the sunburn. Once the sunburn heals and Bob from accounting comes up and taps me on the back, I don't react the same as if Bob from accounting tapped me on the back when I had the sunburn, right? So
Mhm.
I'm not reacting the same. I tell people
Mhm.
that it's not actually the wound that's causing us suffering, it's what we've come to believe about ourselves as a result. And so when I have a rejection wound, what oftentimes happens with people with a rejection wound is they come to believe that I'm not enough. I'm flawed, I'm defective, I'm broken, there's something wrong with me. If I have an abandonment wound, um, I might have a belief around safety or trust, like I can't depend on anybody to be there for me. I'm alone. If I have an abuse wound, I might have a wound or a belief about I'm powerless. There's nothing I
Mhm.
can do to shift that. And so, what happens in the polyvagal theory, is similar to that is we have the event and then we come to a paradigm about our world, which it can be one of these three genres. I am flawed. There's something wrong with me. I'm not safe or I'm powerless. And then that becomes the paradigm in which I see the world. And then I'm very much scanning because things don't feel
Mm.
safe. But as I begin to heal, I can rewrite these core beliefs. I am enough, even though I was picked last for the basketball team. There are people that I can reach out to and I can, uh, who can love on me. I have choices I can make. So as we reframe and rebuild those core beliefs, it can change those things. And I don't have to continue walking around believing I'm broken, I'm flawed. No, I've been hurt
Mm.
and I can heal those wounds can heal.
Your work has been greatly influenced by the work of Dr. Brene Brown, and
Absolutely.
her research on this thing called shame, right? And
Mm,
you just talked about just a moment ago those we come to believe, right? And that's part of the step work as well. We came to believe, but sometimes those beliefs, we might have some very unhealthy, unhelpful, and what we might call false narratives, right?
right.
Um, in that work that Brene Brown does, that research around shame, you've implemented aspects of shame into your work. In fact, you describe shame as having shadows that whisper lies, right?
Mm,
Well, what do those whispers usually sound like, and how can we learn to recognize them in ourselves, those quote unquote shadows of shame?
yeah. So let me share a couple of quotes. Debbie Ford said, "The underbelly of the human psyche, what is often referred to as our dark side, is the origin of every act of self sabotage birthed out of shame. It misdirects our good intentions and drives us to unthinkable acts of self destruction and not so unbelievable acts of self sabotage." And what she's saying is we end up behaving in ways that we would never consider behaving in our best sense, our best self, but something like generates that. And what we call that is shame. And Brene Brown says it's the deep and abiding belief and experience that I'm flawed and defective and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. Shame
Mhm.
is created externally. So we get messages from everywhere, from our parents, from the media, from our peers, from everywhere outside of us about the way that we are supposed to be, the way we're supposed to look, the way we're supposed to sound, the way we're supposed to behave. And then if we are not aligned with whatever those messages are, then we are basically told there's something wrong with us. That's what shame is this external thing that we then internalize. So it comes inside and then it sits there. And every time that our wounds get hit, it reactivates that internal message that I am flawed and defective and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. When I started to learn about shame as a therapist, I was like, well, how do you like that is so huge. It's so big and so heavy and overwhelming. How do we break through that? And shame really had a powerful hold on me. I really did believe that I was flawed and defective and that there was something wrong with me. And I was like, how do I break through that? It sounds so hard. And I came across this concept by a guy named David Van Warmerdam, where he broke, he didn't call it shame, but he broke shame up into different characters, and it really resonated with me. I did not know anything about IFS, so you're going to hear some overlap between what I'm about to share with you and IFS. There is some slight subtle differences between the two, but what I learned was that I could personify shame. I could
Mm.
turn shame into different characters, each one of them having their own role that they play. And I could actually imagine having dialogue with these different characters. And once I was able to learn how to do that, I was able to become shame resilient. I was able to see through the lies that these shadows say and be able to understand that they were saying them because they were trying to take care of my wounds, but they weren't very good at their jobs. And in fact, they would make me feel worse. So the first two, I'm going to disappear for a second, but the first two operate on the spectrum of appraisal. If you've ever had a house or property or jewelry or something that you want to know how much it's worth, you take it to somebody and then they tell you how much they think it's worth. They praise it. And so that's what these two shadows do. The judge tells you that you are worthless, that you are not enough. And it is a condemning shadow and it expects perfection. And if you're not perfect, it's going to tell you that you're worthless and that there's something seriously wrong with you. On the flip side is the royal, which actually it doesn't it is shame based, but it actually is it's if you're familiar with Pia Melody's work, it's like the grandiosity side of things. The royal tells you that you are better than everybody else. So what the judge does is the judge shames you and the royal shames everybody else. The judge tells you that you suck and the royal tells you that everybody else is awful. And so, but both of them are shame based. But the royal wants to elevate you and say you're worth more than everybody else. And the judge says you're worth less. The second two operate on perception. It's we are very concerned about how we are perceived by others. The politician wants everybody to like us, wants us to get votes. So just like a real life politician, in order for them to keep their job, they need people to vote for them. And that's what the politician wants for you. They want everybody to vote for you, to like you. And so part of what the politician does is say, don't let anybody know about your faults and defects and the things you struggle with, because if anybody finds out, they are not going to like you and they won't vote for you. So you got to keep it all hidden, keep it all secret. The martyr believes that you are responsible for everyone else's feelings. And so you need to sacrifice yourself and be the people pleaser and make sure that everyone else's feelings are taken care of. And that way people will like you and just sacrifice yourself because you don't matter. And then the last two operate on the spectrum of power. The impotent one tells you that you have no power, you're powerless, that nothing you can do will ever amount to anything, and you can't change anything. And if you're trying to lose weight, it's not going to work. And if you're trying to overcome an addiction, it's not going to happen because you just don't have what it takes. And then the rebel, which is also a form of grandiosity, tells you you can do whatever you want, that the rules do not apply to you. You have ultimate power and you can choose to do that. So I mean, we're talking about them pretty quickly, but those shadows of shame, um, when I was able to learn about them, I was able to then start to have conversations with them and say, hey, like, hey, judge, like you've shown up and you're telling me that I'm awful and that there's something wrong with me and I'm not trying hard enough. What are you doing that for? And if I could actually have a conversation with the judge, he'd say, well, I don't want you to be rejected. I remember I remember what it feels like when you were rejected and made fun of and bullied. And so if you could just be perfect, then no bad things would ever happen to you again. And I was able to look at that and say, well, that's unreasonable, but I appreciate that you're trying to take care of me and wanting me to be better. So thank you for trying to take care of that wounds, but um, I'm doing my best.
I'm going to take a risk here. If
Sure,
you keep that slide up for just a moment.
sure,
So, um, this is a safe place. I've been a part of this community for almost a year now, and it's a safe community. And it's just the two of us on screen. There's only 140 others that are here, but it's just the two of us on screen, right?
sure.
I'm thinking about those shadows that really impacted and affected my life, right? So, I chose. I was going to say I chose, but I think higher power chose the career path that I'm in now, helping other men who struggle with sexual integrity issues as a person in recovery, or sorry, as a person who struggled with sexual integrity issues for 20 years. So from the time I was 15, um, I was a full-blown sex addict at the early age of 15. It probably started earlier than that. And then it was undiagnosed and untreated for 20 years. And then I got into recovery at age of 35. But the rebel, the royal, you know, those stood out in big ways in the midst of my acting out, sexual acting out, right? Huge ways. Um, and then when I got into recovery, other shadows started showing up as well, right? Again, these shadows of shame as well. Um, you talked about the work of I'm sorry, not Brene, about Pia Mellody just a moment ago. Pia Mellody wrote the book Facing Codependency. And just recently had the opportunity to go through a 5 day, they call it a retreat for codependency. I recognize that at the root or at the core of these, the rebel and the royal, at the root of all this was this unchecked part of myself that was absolutely codependent. And so working on that. So they've shown up in big ways. These shadows have shown up. And I'm still working on them. I've been in recovery again since 2004, the end of 2004. So I will be in recovery for the remainder of my existence here on Earth. And and I'm wondering, again, I'm taking a huge risk. Um, just curious if you'd be open to sharing a little bit about those shadows that have shown up for yourself as well.
Mm, yes. So I too struggled with sexual integrity since I was a teenager. Um, and man, my judge had a lot to say about that. Um, I grew up in a pretty conservative Christian family where, ironically, we never talked about sex, but I somehow felt like I was the worst human on the planet. My
Mhm.
judge really had a lot to say about what I was doing and how awful I was, and that I was the only kid in the entire school that was struggling with that, which turns out that wasn't true. But at the time, I thought I was um, something was seriously wrong with me, and therefore I was not
Mhm.
worthy of love and belonging. So if I could just try harder to be the perfect Christian boy and just try so hard to be that, then I would be enough. The politician played a huge role in that. Like, don't tell anybody. You can't tell
Mhm.
anybody that you struggle. You can't even tell your wife that you struggle with this, because that will be bad. Because if she finds out, she's going to abandon you, she's going to leave you. The impotent one, very powerful in telling me, like, there's nothing you can do. Like, how many times have you tried to change, and you're not going to be successful, and it's not going to work. So those three in particular played a huge role in like the cover up, I guess, of things. The the rebel and the royal would show up during the acting out.
Mhm.
And a lot of
Mhm.
times when I introduce these shadows, they're like, I don't have a royal, I don't have a rebel. And then I'm like, okay, well, who shows up and says, oh, you've had a really hard day, you deserve that? My current drug of choice, which I am like 6 months sober from, is a number 5 with bacon and a Coke Zero from uh, my local hamburger place. But I would be driving home, and my royalty like, oh man, you had a really bad day. You had a lot of hard clients today. You deserve to go have a number 5 with bacon and a large Coke Zero. And I'm like, yeah, I do. I do. And but it's not good for me, rebel. Who
Mhm.
cares? Like, who cares? You can. And so I did, and for the last 6 months, I've lost 60 pounds as a result of not listening to those two shadows. But man, do they still show up every once in a while. I'm driving by and I'm like, oh, I should go. No, you should not. So they're still there, but I've learned how to talk to them.
Yeah. We have a lot of cross addiction in the recovery circles that I'm a part of, a lot of cross addiction. And so, for me, food, sugar, compulsive right? For sure, for sure. We've got about 8 minutes left. So
Yes.
let's not keep everyone here like, oh my gosh, we're in this thing called shame. I call it sitting in the suck. We're sitting in the suck. What do we do, right? And so we've got just a few minutes left. So what does healing actually look
Yeah.
like in everyday life? Not perfection, but progress.
Yeah. So the beauty of being able to understand what the wounds are gives us a sense of how to heal it because it gives us an idea of what we need. So the opposite of loss, for most people, when they think of that, is gain. But I can't really pull my grandma out of the grave and have her hang out with me again unless I want to be Norman Bates from Psycho, which is not a great idea. So no, we can't do that. So with attachment wounds, the opposite of loss is assurance that everything's that is going to be okay. That even though grandma passed away or my best friend moved, that it's going to be all right. That life is going to be um, going forward, and I have people in my life that will love me and care about me, and so I have some assurance around that loss. The opposite of neglect is attention. To have somebody pay attention to me when my wound of neglect is being hit, what I really need is someone to just pay attention to me. The opposite of rejection is acceptance. The opposite of abandonment is presence. The opposite of betrayal is trust. And the opposite of abuse is compassion. And so I use this analogy when my kids were learning how to ride a bike and they would fall and they would scrape their elbow. I could have been that really crappy father who came up and said something like, "What's wrong with you? Can't you learn how to ride your bike? Yeah, I mean, how many times have I?" And shame them, right? Which is what we do um, when our wounds get hit. We get shamed, or I can say, "Oh, honey, like you fell down. Let's look at that wound. Oh my gosh, let's
Mm,
wash that off. Let's put a band-aid on it. That's gonna look pretty cool later. You can show people your war wound, like, and I can tend to the wound with love.
mhm,
So right, I can do the same here. So when I am able to identify what my attachment wounds are, I then can say, okay, I need some attention right now. Who can I call? I can call my buddy Joe and say, hey, I had a really hard day. I just need to hear your voice and have you tell me that I love you. And you do.
mm,
And I am so grateful. I need someone to just hold space who can provide some presence for me, who can be compassionate. And when I start to tend to those wounds and get my needs met, the wounds start to heal. And it changes those core beliefs that I have. Where in the beginning I thought, well, nobody's going to show up for me and I'm all alone and I'm horrible. No, I am not alone. I'm loved. I'm cared for. People show up for me and I
mm.
am not powerless. And that is how wounds heal. And we come to a place of peace and joy and love.
Thank you. It sounds like community is a huge part of your healing, right? And that's that external family. In the Friendly Circle Berlin, folks have gotten to know this thing called internal family systems. And what I'm hearing from you is that let's go back to the work of Pia Melody, where she suggests that each one of us has a functioning adult, she calls it, on the inside. And in the world of internal family systems, we call it the authentic self, right? But it sounds like in those moments where you've identified some of those shadows of shame and begin to challenge those shadows of shame with challenge those false narratives, right? With the truth of who you are. It sounds like that functional adult is showing up in that moment, and you're sitting with those wounded parts and you're
Yeah.
tending to those wounded parts, right? Dr. Gabor Mate, a lot of his work is revolved around authenticity versus attachment. Authenticity versus attachment. And it sounds like the authentic you chooses to show up and tend to those inner children, those wounded parts of yourself, typically
Right.
inner wounded children, if you will, right? And that is also not just influenced, but also it's also supported by the external family that you have in your own life, right? The friends and the
Right.
support community that you have. So I guess I'm responding to this ahead of you, but you often emphasize that importance of community. Why can't we do this work alone?
Well, because we're dealing with attachment wounds. And the way that we heal attachment is through connection.
Mm,
So yes, I can do some self wound care and stuff, but I also need a connection with a power greater than myself. I need a connection with friends and family and loved ones because we're all hurting. We
mm,
all have wounds. And so the way we heal that is through connecting healthy connections with other people. That's how we do it. And I can't do that by myself. I can't tend to an abandonment wound by myself. I need others to be there with me.
yeah, a friend of mine. We were having this conversation last night during our drive. Where we were both we were talking we were talking shop, and we were talking about clients and how the clients that choose to intentionally wrap themselves with the support that they deserve, even when those shadows of shame show up and say, you know, you're worthless, you're a piece of crap, you know, no one loves you, et cetera, et cetera. There's this recognition that others can emphasize the opposite, right? In that community, right? Is it Johann Hari that says the opposite of addiction isn't necessarily sobriety. The opposite of addiction is intimate human connection, right?
Right. Well, that's the beauty of like 12-step groups, right? You go in and you tell them your most horrible stuff, and people ask for your phone number at the end because they care about you. It's like, I expected you all to reject me, but you didn't. And that's the beauty of groups like this, where we hold space for each other.
That's right. So that sounds like this thing called vulnerability. We just have a minute left, but what
Mm.
role does vulnerability play in building those safe connections that support healing?
Well, vulnerability means that I need to unpack my wound and show it to you and say,
Mm,
hey, look at this rejection wound, or look at this
mm,
abuse wound. It's really bad. It's really painful. Can I show it to you? And you're like, oh man, that looks painful. And you
mm.
don't shame me, like, what's wrong with you? Like, what's why, but you're like, man, I love you. I'm so sad that you are hurting, and you say you want to see mine, and that's vulnerability. And we show each other our owies, for lack of a better word, and we have compassion for that. And it's beautiful. And that's,
Beautiful.
you can't connect without it.
Mm-mm. You cannot connect without it. Absolutely.